Today I have with me author Carrie Walker. Carrie, welcome to Between the Lines podcast. I'm so glad you were able to come on today.
And I'm so excited to be here to talk about my stories and my writing journey and just chat with you. It's really a gift.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I released my first book in April, and I actually never really had planned to write. I mean, I was always told by teachers and stuff that I should write growing
Mhm.
up, but I went to school for engineering, married my high school sweetheart.
Oh,
Um, we
wow.
we did youth ministry for 10 years, volunteer, and along that time built a family of 7 children, and
Oh, my word.
two of them we adopted, five homegrown, and kind of living life stories just kind of would get knit in my heart, but I never really thought, oh, I'm gonna be a novelist and I'm going to, write books. I was always, since I love to read, it was always, anybody who loves to read thinks, oh, it would be cool, to write a book someday,
Yeah.
and stuff. But I kind of feel like I need to feel called to do something for me to do it. And I didn't really have a story for a long time. Like I had all these nuggets that I would kind of like reflect on, or whatever, but um not really like, oh, I'm gonna go write a story. And then
That's a big thing. I mean, having a nugget and then trying to create an entire book out of that nugget, that's kind of overwhelming, I think.
yeah, and especially when you're not even on this venture of planning to be a novelist, or whatnot. And it was actually that was kind of how I started writing, was my first book that released in April. One of the teens that we had ministered to when we were in youth ministry years before was an adult at that point, and she actually found out she was pregnant and gave birth to a baby that the doctors told her wouldn't survive, and she was caring for this baby by herself. And I was just so inspired by her, and I was just, gosh, how many people are there like this out there that are, maybe caring for someone by themselves, or fighting for their child. And I went to go visit them in the hospital at one point when the baby had been admitted, and I met the baby, and I just had this like inspiration of, how many lives has that baby touched, and her mom probably has no idea. And so it seemed like that was kind of like a seed of a story was planted within me, but that's not a whole story. And so I kind of sat with it and wouldn't leave me alone. And then at that point I had 7 children, and
How do you find time to write? Oh, my
well,
word.
this is well, this is why I really feel like I need to feel like God is calling me to do something, because he'll make the time if you're
Right.
called to do it. Where if it's me driving the ship and it's not a calling, then I'm probably going to run into so many problems.
Absolutely.
And so I really, the idea wouldn't leave me alone. And some of my older kids were teens at that point, and so I had kind of this revolving door going on. And some teens that I would see either at the school or maybe that would come through our door kind of had that, lost thing going on. And some of them were so lost they weren't even trying to find their way at that point. And then I kind of thought, what if a baby like that touched the life of a teen like that? And then I had a story idea,
Right.
and I it just happened. And this is kind of where how do you write a story with 7 kids? Right at that time, like divine timing, my husband got slammed at work. Like he was bringing home work every single night, and so we would put the kids to bed and we'd sit in our office and he would try to get caught up. And I this was like this wide open time to try to flesh out this story. And so I basically drafted a whole story during that time when he was so busy. So we were still kind of spending time together, but we were getting, he was had to do all this work. So I'm like, well, I have had this story that was just, really kind of, tugging at me. And right at that time, Karen Kingsbury also offered an online like how to write a novel course. And I love her books. Like I love the powerful messages, but also how I just love having, more than just a splash of romance in a book, but I want, also more of a message than maybe
Right.
some of your straight romances will have. So I really love the way she did it. And so I was like, oh, perfect. I'm thinking about writing this book and she's offering this class and everything. And so, and honestly, I haven't seen her offer an online class like that since. So it really is, in reflecting, kind of really kind of crazy how it all timed out. She did have an intensive a couple years later, which I also went to, but again, I haven't seen one of those offered. So
Hmm.
it really is kind of, it almost felt like divine timing the way that some of it timed out. And so I mean, I obviously went through all of the writing and editing and writing and pitching and all this stuff to release that book in April. But I, in the meantime, wrote out the series for the books. So I had that first book, which is the story of this single mother who was, told her baby wouldn't live. He does live, but changes the life of a troubled teen. And all my books have three points of view. So they toe the line between women's fiction and romance. Two of the points of view are kind of follow a somewhat typical romance arc, but the third point of view is a character who kind of has their own storyline, but they definitely intertwine and they both affect each other. So in that first book,
So
the
we haven't said the title yet. It's called Emma's Hero, right?
right, yes, Emma's Hero is the first book in the series, and it's a three-book series. So
Okay.
in Emma's Hero, we have Emma, who's the single mother, Ben, who is a paramedic that she ends up coming in contact with because of, she goes into labor. Well, she's supposed to have a C-section. She goes into labor prior to that, so he gets called to the scene, and that's how they meet. But then the crossover character is a 17-year-old boy who's kind of at that place where he's, on his computer all the time. His mom's trying to get him to, do something. His father's left the family and he's just feeling kind of worthless. And she decides to, when he ignores her plea to get, do something to contribute to the world, she signs him up to help Emma with like grocery and medicine deliveries when she comes home from the hospital. So of course he thinks this is, the worst thing in the world that possibly could have happened to
Being
him.
punished.
Yes, and gosh, I wish I had applied for that job or whatever. Like nothing could be worse than this. I'm a socially awkward kid. I can't do these things. And so over the course of the story, his life changes from, you know, I obviously won't spoil it in case anybody hasn't read it, but his life changes. It's a very much coming of age for him, but also his experience with Emma and even Ben, they all affect each other. Now, the second book, which is releasing in February, is called Right Before Their Eyes. And in that book, Mason is now, it's 5 years later. So in the first book, he's
Oh,
a
Mason's
teen.
a teenager. Mason's a
Mason's
17-year-old. Okay.
Yep, yep. So Mason's a 17-year-old in the first book. And over the course of the series, you kind of watch Mason grow from this, lost teenager into a man. And you have this underscoring theme throughout the course of the books that you can see how this baby that doctors said wouldn't survive changes the world, even years later. So you can kind of watch that happen over years' time. So in the second book, right before their eyes, Mason is now, in his 20s. And in the first book, you'll leave it. And if it were a standalone, you'd think, okay, he's going to be all right. And in many ways, he is. Like he's found his faith. He kind of found, a direction in life. This baby changed his life, but he still has a lot of growing to do, especially in the realm of relationships and being bold and those sorts of things. So in that story, we have him who's kind of at the brink of like choosing his medical school, but he made a friend in the first book who he's fallen in love with, and he's just so sweet. I love the guy, but because he was such a socially awkward teen and really didn't have a ton of friends or a father around to kind of see how to, you know, really have healthy relationships and things like that. He's afraid of doing anything. He doesn't want to lose her. So over the course of their friendship, he's kind of been slapped into the friend zone because,
He put himself there basically, right?
basically,
Yeah.
and there was plenty of opportunities. And she even, would have probably been open to that, but this is 5 years later. She's like that. There's nothing happening there. Like, and so she's dating another guy, and Claire is the girl, and she in her own life. And I feel like a lot of us have probably had a place like this where, she loves her family. She is a social worker in the foster care system, and she's really passionate about helping her kids. And then she's got this career-driven boyfriend who she's convinced herself has the same goals as her. And at the beginning of the story, she had agreed with her, promised her parents she would live with her grandma, who's kind of got early stage dementia, when they go on a mission trip. And she's still got all these, her social work going on, but all was fine at that point. And then grandma starts a house fire. It's clear that her condition is advancing, and she's still kind of got it on her shoulders to, help her family till her parents get home. But, one of the teens on her foster care load also kind of starts to have increased needs. Her foster home is in danger of being lost. She's already kind of been bounced around a lot. So Claire is really motivated to try to find her a good place, so that because she loves this girl and she wants her to be, in a good situation. Well, that foster home falls through earlier than expected, and she gets transferred to a group home. And that's our third character, is Lucia. She's a foster teen that she gets removed from her most recent foster home, which actually was a good foster home. And there was a health problem. It was unexpected. And so Claire never had time to get her a good, another replacement, because not a lot of families take foster teens. And so she gets transferred to this, very unwelcoming group home. And we watch her just kind of go through yet another change where she's feeling like she's getting rejection at every turn. And we kind of just walk through the footsteps of a teen where, from the outside looking in, you might think this girl's causing some trouble. She's, making bad choices. And I thought it was so important to show it from her point of view, because when you're walking through it with her, everything she does makes sense. Like, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my gosh, I can totally see why she would do that. But if you were on the outside looking in, it just looks like she's skipping school. She's doing, whatever the different things are that are happening.
Easy
It
to
looks
judge when we don't know what's going through their hearts and minds.
exactly. And so we have, Claire trying to help this girl and keep her from, sinking before she can find her a foster home. And Mason, he loves Claire, but now he's never been in a position where he is got a lot of financial resources. And so he feels called to be a doctor because of some of the things that, he was changed by the baby in the first book. But medical school is not cheap. And he's got, an option to go to a school nearby, which would keep him near Claire, keep him near all these people that he's, finally formed a bond with and feels so close to. But there's a pilot program in New York for free medical school. And if he were to get that, all these financial worries would just disappear. But obviously, that's going to add a huge emotional, social, all that type of conflict to his life. And in typical Mason, social needs social growth type personality, he's not talking to any of the people he should be talking to figure this out. So none of Claire doesn't even know, and he's trying to make this decision, and he is seeking God's will in this. But he's like, I feel like a lot of people, us, run into this as well, where we're seeking God's will, but it doesn't seem clear. Like,
Mhm.
there, and is he telling me, this or that? Because it could be either one, and um he he faces all of that. And then Lucia is just spinning out of control, and they all kind of converge at the apex to again affect each other's lives and change each other's lives. And I guess maybe I write stories like that because I kind of approach life that way. I don't know if you've ever kind of, I don't, it's not a game, but kind of played that thing where maybe you meet somebody that ends up being a really important part of your life, or there's an instance where, gosh, if that hadn't happened, I don't think, all these things that happened later would have happened. And then if you back up and say, well, so many of these other small things had to happen for that to even,
Oh, absolutely. That's how I
you
ended
know,
up with my husband.
yeah.
You go
And
back
it's
and say, if I hadn't thrown my back out by doing this wrong, then I wouldn't have gone into the chiropractor, and I wouldn't have, yeah, then
yeah,
you start building on those things, and yeah.
yeah. So I feel like that's how God knits us together, right? Sometimes it's the teen who you didn't even know
Right.
6 months prior, who if he hadn't, he wouldn't even be there if, this baby hadn't been born. Or in the case of this story, it's literally some of the lowest points in these characters' lives that if God didn't let them experience that,
Mhm.
they would never have met, and they would
Absolutely.
never have changed each other's lives. And so I kind of
It makes
approach
you
all
it makes you think about all the things that are happening in the background of our lives, all the little things that we are not aware of where God is working. He's working out a plan that we can't see. And then when they finally all converge, you're like, oh, now that makes sense. You know?
exactly. And like Lucia has a big moment like that because obviously she's had a really tumultuous life. Her grandma died when she was like 8, and she was kind of like the really stable person in her life. Then her parents were arrested. She went into foster care. She's kind of bounced to these foster care homes. She loses the good one, and gets sent to this group home. So she's really kind of like, yeah, like I just don't see God working in any of this. It sounds like a nice story kind of thing. And when she finally has that moment where she can literally see it, then she looks back on everything that happens and she's like, she can see him in all of it, you know, and so many little things that at the time just she couldn't see it.
Several years ago, there was Donald Miller, who's a Christian writer. I don't know if you know him, Blue Like Jazz, and he's got a few books out. It's been a while. He put on what's called a storyline conference. It was down in Santa Barbara, California, and I was writing full time at that point, not published, but looking. And my husband thought it would be a great idea. Let's go do the storyline conference. It was a weekend getaway, and it was beautiful location at Westmont College, and anyway, the thing that I came away from that, and I've used in a couple of speaking engagements, is that he would have you take like a storyline, like you write out your story and you put your years, as long as you could remember, like 4 or 5 years old, and increments of years, and everything that's positive you put above this line, the storyline. Everything that's negative you put below the storyline, and you write those things that you can remember, those key moments in your life that were really, really, really hard,
Hmm.
or even as a child, something that stuck with you that maybe hurt you in some way that you can see. And then as you go through and you look at those things, you have to look and see how did God redeem those things and what of those things on the bottom played a part in those high things in the top. I mean, it was incredible, those things on the top. And when you go through and you actually analyze and look at all the negatives, like I was a middle child and always felt kind of ignored. 5 kids in the family. I was right smack in the middle. And so I would strive for certain things to get attention. One of them was doing really well in school and whatever I could do to get attention. But those things that I strived with and when I was a kid led me to my education or led me to this. Or the hard things in life, often you have to have those hard things in order to gain those positive things. And you can't see that sometimes. But if you can put it out on that line, and just what you're talking about is exactly that. It's like if you really believe that God is working in your life, you can look and see how he redeemed every single low point, difficulty, season, hard stuff, whatever it may be, you can see it.
Hmm.
And it's an
Absolutely.
incredible experience in understanding that God is working your story for a greater purpose than what we can imagine in the present.
And I love that idea. Gosh, I'm gonna pocket that because I feel like there's so many times when you're talking to someone else where a suggestion like that to literally map it out would be so helpful. Because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to see,
It is.
what even like little things, that end up trickling down and becoming so important later on.
Yeah, it was an incredible exercise in and it impacted me in a huge way in my faith in trusting in the hard stuff that God has a plan in it and that he's going to redeem it. And I've never had and I've had some really hard stuff. I have
Hmm.
a son who loved Jesus with all his heart. He was sexually abused by a priest as a child.
Hmm.
And now he's 35 years old. And we had this conversation, and he's walked away from his faith. But we had this conversation yesterday. He talked to me. He's living in Tokyo, married to he just got married. And you just see God's hand in it. Like his wife. she works for the social whatever it is where she works with sexually abused people.
Oh,
That's
wow.
one of the things that she does that understands his challenges. And he told me yesterday, I said, you need to find purpose because he just kind of, and he's healthier now than I've ever seen him, physically, emotionally healthier. I'm spiritually broken still, but he said, Mom, I do have a purpose. I think my purpose is they've been asking him where she works if he would consider speaking into the lives of people that have been abused and how can he do that from where he is. So I told my husband this morning, I just like, it's like, why Japan? Why is my son in Tokyo? Well, he's so far away. And
Yeah,
but God is working something in this.
absolutely. And he could be so powerful and so
Exactly.
helpful.
Exactly. We just don't know. And he said for the first time yesterday, he goes, I finally got it, Mom. It's not my fault this happened. It's
No.
not my fault. But he's struggled with this for 20 something years. So but you see, God's timing is not our timing. I've been crying myself to sleep for years praying over him. But you start seeing God is working it out. And we have to trust in that when it's so hard to understand why he allows things, so hard to understand it. We have to trust that God has a plan and a purpose for every one of his children if they would just follow him.
Amen. Amen. And that's, I think, at the heart of a lot of the stories that I come up with. And it is kind of walking through like the everyday lives of people I don't really write about, super famous people or anything like this. It's, in the first book, it was a single mother and a teen and a paramedic. And in the second book, it's a social worker and a foster teen and a college kid that's, trying to figure out med school. And it's just like,
Ordinary
yeah,
people.
ordinary people, but they just have, when you zoom in on our ordinary lives, there's so many extraordinary things.
Exactly.
And I hope that, the stories can connect with somebody, and maybe even if you're not going through what they're going through, the themes are there, like God is working even if you can't see him, even if you're seeking him. Like Lucia wasn't really seeking him
He seeks us.
because
That's the thing is he's seeking us. He's
absolutely.
pursuing us. We're not pursuing him. You think
Yep.
once you're following God, oh, he already was working on pursuing you long before that happened.
That's so true. And then I mean I have like in this most recent book, I've got two and they're both not seeing it. You've got one who's she almost doesn't believe because her life's been so bad. So she's almost blocking herself off from seeing God in anything at that point. But then you've got Mason who he's seen God work. So he's trying to figure it out and he can't see it either, until that moment when your eyes get open and then
Right.
you're like, oh, well, and now I see it.
That point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these books are on, in fact, I downloaded Emma's Hero this morning
Oh,
and
good.
started reading it. I was drawn in right away, by the way. So
Oh,
I downloaded Emma's Hero because it's on Kindle Unlimited. I'm cheap. If I have to pay for Kindle Unlimited, but I can get it
I
on
mean,
there.
there's a lot of great books on Kindle
There
Unlimited
are
and
a lot of great books on Kindle. Not that my book, I'm not saying my books are great. I'm just saying my books are all on Kindle Unlimited. And, writers actually can sometimes make better money off of Kindle Unlimited than if you buy the ebook. So
yeah, oh,
works out.
absolutely. It's
Puts
a
it
it's
all the
a great option for both readers and authors.
It
And
is. It is. So I did download that. So will Right Before Their Eyes also be offered on Kindle Unlimited?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up for pre-order now. The paperback actually releases a bit earlier than the ebook on February 5th, but yeah, it'll be on Kindle Unlimited just like Emma's Hero. And I feel like a lot of people are finding the stories that way through Kindle Unlimited, which is a great option.
Well, by the time this podcast airs, if right now we're at the middle of January, by the time this podcast airs, Right Before Their Eyes will have already released. So, because
Right.
this is going to do, I think we have this on February 20th. So you guys can go out anytime and get both of these books. And I was drawn in. I'm not always, I struggle. If I'm not drawn into a book in the very beginning, then I struggle pushing through because, as a writer, we're an editor in our minds, we're
Yep.
constantly editing. And so I was really drawn into that. So I hope you guys will read that. And then just something else that I was on your website, your book trailer. Did you do that book trailer?
Yeah, I did it.
So what do you use Canva? What did you use to do that? It was incredible.
I basically went to some of the free stock video and photo websites out there, like Pexel
Right.
and and I had to spend so much time like finding things that would work because in free videos there's only so many options. And as a kid,
Have you ever tried Canva?
yeah, that's where I put it together. Like once I
Okay,
had all these
gotcha.
different clips, I used Canva to like kind of put
Put
it
it
all
together.
together. But yeah, it was an adventure video. It was not easy.
No, and the Canva has a lot of good free stuff on. I mean, not for, I pay for I do the paid one just because you have an opportunity to get so many good things. I find more stuff on Canva. I don't even bother going to Unsplash and Pexels anymore or Pixabay because I could find them on Canva. But
There.
that's a great option. So anyway, there is a wonderful trailer on Carrie's website that you can see the trailer of the book Emma's Hero. And then her book Emma's Hero is on there right now as well. I'm assuming you're going to put Right Before Their Eyes will also be added to that website.
Yep,
But
I'll be adding that.
I will put that on in the show notes. I'll have your website linked. And on her website, you can follow her on all of her social media as well. Do you have a newsletter, Carrie?
I do. And I think I have a link to sign up for that on my website as well.
Okay. And do you do a blog post or
I send out monthly newsletters occasionally, maybe a second one if there's some sort of big news or something I want to share with
okay.
everyone, but most of it's in the newsletter.
Okay. So, and her beautiful website that just found out her husband designed for her. So you might want to go on there and check that out. Um, so any last words before I mean, so I was, from the time I was 12 years old, I knew I wanted to be a writer. So you came into this late. So people that, not come in, I mean, it took me forever to get started, but I knew I was going to do it. But,
Hmm.
some people are coming into this and they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. What suggestion would you give them if they think they have a kernel of a story? What do you think would be the first line suggestion you would give them?
I would say, do it. Sometimes I think you can talk yourself out of anything,
Absolutely.
and my first book was published when I was 44, and I have a second one coming out and a third, and I never thought I was going to be writing novels. I definitely didn't envision a series until I wrote that first book and realized I loved doing it,
Yeah.
and I mean, how many stories do you hear about authors even much older than me releasing their first book? And so
Well,
don't
that
let
would be
yourself,
me. I was a lot older than you when I released my first book.
yeah. So don't
So,
let yourself talk yourself out of those kinds of things because that's just, letting, the doubt control you and you shouldn't.
well, and if you have a story in you, there's a good chance God put it there to start with. So,
Exactly.
I think part of that is we can block. So we have these kids that we work with on Wednesday nights, and we've been teaching them about prayer the last couple weeks. And it's like if you guys aren't really quiet and listening and waiting for him to speak, and then sensitive to that, you can lose on a lot of blessings. So you just
That's the
really need
truth.
to be open to that. So it's been such a pleasure, Carrie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys will all go out and get Emma's Hero, and then again, Right Before Their Eyes is the second book. I'm gonna whip through the first one, and then once it comes out on the second one, I can grab that one too. So thank you. It's been a blessing. I appreciate your time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I loved chatting with you.
It's been fun. Bye.
Bye.